Okay, welcome back to Jen and Ren's Coach for the Future chat room. I'm Ren,
And I'm Jen.
and today we're going to be talking about self-care. So we chose this topic because we think it's really important, not only as something that we talk about with our clients as coaches, but also something that we need to do for ourselves as coaches. So today we'll be talking a little bit about what self-care looks like, how we apply it, and how we help our clients use it in their lives, but then also kind of go on a more personal level and talk about how we use self-care to help ourselves and some of the obstacles that we sometimes face and trying to identify when and how to do self-care.
Brilliant. Yeah. So for me, that's a really interesting topic because I think I struggled with self-care for quite a long time in my life. I think I guess I did a certain form of self-care, but I also I'm a very much a doer rather than a beer. And maybe for people who are doers more than beers, it's a little bit harder to stop and actually kind of take time to just be with your body and with your mind. So I think that's maybe where doers really need to take a breath at one point.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah. And I think I'm probably more of a beer. Like, I mean, I like to go out and do things, but I think I don't want to call myself lazy, but I tend to be much more like least amount of work possible kind of person.
That's a great trait actually, because it makes you sometimes go like efficiently on it as well. So that's a great trait to have. I mean, I think one of the things that I try to sort of go through with my clients when we start off is also sort of having a feel of where they lean more towards more being or towards more doing, and usually we lean more naturally towards one of them, and then actually we can do work to actually help ourselves to sort of balance it out a little bit. And I know for me that self-care was a big thing, because I tended to like sort of get overexcited about the next thing that was on my list or the next thing I was going to do, or sort of get really engrossed in what I'm doing at the moment. So at the time I was a solicitor as well, so I had a really busy schedule and quite a stressful schedule that would keep my brain constantly engaged, and then I would forget to do things like drink or eat or stand up. And I would spend hours wanting to go to the loo without going to the loo, like basic self-care, right? We're not even talking about meditation or exercise. We're talking about just literally minimal bodily needs.
Wow. So I guess like that kind of I can see that happening when you start into a new project that you're really passionate about and excited about, and you kind of start getting carried away with the momentum of that thing. So even if it's something that you enjoy, you might find yourself so wrapped up that you forget to have those moments of self-care.
Completely.
Whereas like for me, I think I mean, I don't think I've ever really struggled with self-care, but I think it comes from a place of selfishness for me. Like I've always been more like me first. And and I think that's again, that kind of ties in with this like almost this feeling of sometimes being lazy, which so I've had the opposite struggle where I've had to find the balance of when there's too much self-care, or like if I'm being too selfish in a situation, and trying to be motivated enough that like I can keep going, but like not get too wrapped up in the self-care stuff.
So how can you do too much self-care? We're going on there, but now you've got me curious. How can you do too much self-care?
I guess again, like I kind of see it as like selfishness, where I just get so like I will just be like, no, like I don't want to do that today. It's stressing me out. I'm just gonna like, but it's not so much like denial or procrastination, because that's a totally other thing.
Yeah. I was just going to say that
Yeah,
I'm hearing the avoider or the procrastinator there. We all have it, obviously, but yeah.
But there's like other times when it's not that at all. It's just literally like I guess I just find it easy to be selfish. So I would say I carve out like a good chunk of a day, like half a day or sometimes even more than half a day each week, where I'm just doing whatever I want.
That's
and
amazing.
Sometimes it's on a weekend, but yeah. And I think like it's, again, like I don't think it's because I'm consciously trying to practice self-care. I think it's just because I'm
do it naturally,
able, or like I just kind of have that like selfish like mindset.
Well, maybe you can help me then, because I think that would be brilliant, and maybe you can help our listeners as well. So I guess I'm here more to sort of showcase how difficult it was for me to actually be able to do that, because I was kind of the opposite. I tend to put other people's needs first and then forget about myself, which obviously is not healthy either. So there's unhealthy in both ways if you do too much of one, I guess. And self-care is about, I guess, maybe self-care is about as well having that balance and finding that balance.
Yes, definitely. Yeah.
So I was reading actually about, a little bit more about, the different types of self-care that you can have. And obviously there's the physical self-care, which is probably the first one to think about, because obviously it's our body. And that's the one I was mentioning, for example, feeding yourself at the right times and listening to your body and exercising and things like that, which I think with our society nowadays and working from home and COVID, it's actually been weirdly enough easier but also harder to do it and actually get up.
I've heard mixed feedback, like some people where maybe they were working at the office all the time and they always felt rushed, because since COVID they found it easier for those moments of self-care because everything kind of slowed down in their lives, whereas some other people it's almost like inertia sets in and then it's too hard to get up and do that physical self-care again. So so it really depends on the person and like what you were doing before the change and after the change. But
I guess that's actually, that hits on one of the biggest things of what self-care is. Self-care is something that we have to motivate ourselves to do, and I think that's the idea. Is the key thing is it comes from us, and I think that was why it was maybe harder for me, because I've got my own negative insecurities and voices in my head, as we all have, and mine are probably, yours are sort of saying, oh, you're lazy or whatever. I heard it earlier.
That's true. I have the opposite voice.
mine is saying, oh, you're not doing enough or you're not good enough, right? So it's kind of forced me to do more and do more and do more and do more, right? And in a way, and yours is actually kind of making you do less to make you prove to yourself that maybe you are actually lazy. Do you see what I mean? It's like those awful things that make us do things the wrong way around. And so I think mine just kind of constantly does that. And so at one point I had to stop. I actually reached a burnout in my job. And the biggest thing I have done, I think, in my life, self-care wise, is quitting my job and doing the coaching for me. So for me, I think it started with something that felt active. It felt like, okay, it's my job. It's for my next step. It's for my, so it was still in the action in a way. So it made it possible for me to get there. If I had tried meditation first, I would never have got to self-care. Because meditation meant stopping, and that is just not just not how I'm wired. So when I actually realized that, okay, I'm stuck in my career is making me feel really bad and also physically bad. I was getting like pains and all sorts of things. And once I sort of realized I needed help and I went to see a coach, what happened so obviously that was self-care, because in a way it was emotional self-care, it was psychological self-care. Self-care isn't just physical. There's loads of different ways that we need self-care in our life. And so I guess it was self-care, but I kind of didn't think I realized it was until I was doing it. And then the impact that had on me to actually decide to do a career that was in line with myself, that I didn't feel like I was going against myself every time I was going to work. That was a huge, huge realization, that I didn't have to fight myself every single day. And that opened the door to all the rest of the self-care. So once I was in line with that in my active, then it allowed me to realize the passive, the being time that is equally important.
So okay, so let's do a review. So there's the physical self-care, there's the psychological self-care, emotional self-care. Are there any others? I guess there's spiritual.
There's spiritual self-care. I guess there's also a certain element of financial as well.
Yes.
And what else would there be? Physical.
I guess it could be in any area of your life where you it's like prevalent, or and I think that's the thing, we kind of tend to put self-care only in one category, and physical is the easiest one because it's the one that I think is most like mediatized right now, and for a good reason. And because it's active, it's like you can see it, other people can see it. It's something that you do as an, whereas like something like psychological or emotional self-care, it requires a lot more reflection, kind of like internal work, which can be very challenging, especially like if you don't even understand like the difference of like internal, external identity and like awareness and that kind of thing. So I guess it's just a huge learning curve, depending on like what your previous life experiences are, your age, your maturity, and so
and absolutely. And one thing you were saying as well about like it might be easier to start with the physical as well because it's active, but actually I found it really hard because it was, in a way, there was something else going on. What I needed to work was on myself. I needed to realize that I needed to put myself first before I could actually really do that. And that's through doing that emotional and psychological self-care that I managed to get to that. And now I can really feel why every morning I will have a large glass of water. That's the first thing I do. It's a little thing, but it really helps me. Then I'll have a cup of tea. I don't drink caffeine anymore because I've listened to my body and I know the impact it has on me. And I will have a walk at lunch. I will have my lunch. Things like that. I will always listen to my body now. At least I try. I'm saying always, but I will for the basic needs always, which I never did. Even like maybe a year and a half ago, I still didn't do it for them.
That's I was just talking to one of my student clients about listening to the body just like last week or something, and because something that I had to learn, like as a teenager, I did a lot of dance. And so I had this, I had a very like specific type of relationship with my body, where it was like, where like I saw my body as a tool, as a possession, as something to work for me. And it wasn't until I was older where I started to understand that no, the body works with me, that it's not a possession, it's just a part of me. I have to honor it. And so I had to start listening, like literally listening to how the body is communicating to me, not just, am I hungry? Am I tired? Do I have a pain? Do I have an illness? But like, it can speak to you like you should go outside and get some fresh air, you should get some vitamin D, or you should do some yoga or some deep breathing or some meditation, or you should sleep just 15 minutes longer. Like there's all these subtleties, but they're there. And once you can train, that instinct, like that opens a whole new, because then you get into diet, you get into like physical health, like strength and immune strength and stress.
I think that's what's important as well, is that I think it can feel overwhelming for a lot of people. I know it did for me, what self-care is, when you see some people who are sort of health coaches, and how much they know and how much there is out there. You were just giving a list, and there's so many things. It almost feels endless of what you could do. And I think that was so overwhelming for me that I actually ended up doing none of them. And weirdly enough, for me, the thing that you hit really the nail on the head was when you said about listening to your body. And if anything, I think self-care actually probably is that. It's about listening to your body and that learning your body's language. Because once it's like anything, even in coaching, what coaching is, or emotional intelligence, it's about actually understanding your emotions, like noticing them and understanding them, and therefore being able to regulate and control them in a way that helps you, that benefits you and benefits others, right? So if you can do that, once you're aware of something, your brain can't forget it, right? Or very rarely can actually forget it. So if you're aware of something, it will create some sort of change. That's what an awareness is. So I guess if you're aware, if you've learned to listen to your body and you become aware of what your body needs, it will become much harder to ignore it.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. I think that's actually what happened to me, is that once I realized the triggers for me and what my body was saying to me, that it was saying, you are putting everyone before your work or whatever, and you are not hearing me. I am now in pain. And like you said, you shouldn't have to wait until then. But I think I'm far from the only person to wait until that happens. You know?
There seems to be like something to say about the time as well, because even if you do start to listen to your body and start being aware of the signals, it also requires that you dedicate that time, like literal time. And that's something else that a lot of people would obviously struggle with, especially, with this fast-paced lifestyle of deciding how do you carve out that time in the day when you've got so many other responsibilities to do? Like, because that's the excuse that I hear a lot of people say is, oh, I don't have time for that. Like, I don't have time to take a bath. I don't have time to meditate. I don't have time to make myself a smoothie instead of going to Starbucks and getting a sugary latte. Like,
hey, I used to think I didn't have time to go to the loo when I had a fast-paced day at work. I know exactly what you mean. You're absolutely right. And time is a thing. And I think it's even worse in careers where actually it's kind of true. Like, it's more true, or at least it's like, it's easier for the brain to trick you to think it's true. That's more the thing. So for example, like I know that in a legal career is the one I know the best. And the way it's difficult is that because sometimes you are in what we call a mediation. It's where two parties meet up and spend literally like 12 hours non-stop trying to reach a settlement agreement, right? When these moments happen, when it's so intense that every minute seems to count, every word seems to count, it's really hard to sort of take a step back and realize, actually, no, I will actually be better at my job. I will feel better if I just go to the loo for a second, and it will be fine. But your brain it justifies it. It says, no, you don't have time. It justifies my attendance to you, if you see what I mean.
Right.
So maybe when we're in jobs like that, really look out for it, because it kind of it justifies the brain, and it says, no, you can't, you absolutely can't, and it's justifiable. Like, you can't go to the loo.
Yeah, that's interesting. So what else? So you said you wake up and you have that drink of water. Yeah. And then you have some herbal tea, because you said you don't drink caffeine. No. What else do you do? What are your regime throughout the day?
I guess I'm, like I'm saying, I'm at the very beginning of that in my life, because for me, just being able to so quitting my job, starting another job that I actually loved, becoming an entrepreneur in the sense of following my lifestyle. And being in control of my sleep pattern again. So I'm an evening person. I've always been. I love writing, for example. I love writing fiction or nonfiction. I love writing, but my creative brain always functions at night. And so for me, early mornings have never, ever been good for me. And therefore, I never slept enough. I was always tired. I spent my life tired. And now that I can actually sort of adapt my hours, and also because of the type of job that I do, lots of people actually prefer getting their coaching sessions in the evening. That's perfect for me after work. It's perfect for
Yeah.
me. It means that I have time in the morning to do the things that I want to do, to relax, not to have, you know, my brain on work. And so that's actually fundamentally changed, because now I'm not tired anymore. So that's huge for me. So I guess sleep pattern is a big one. Being able to sleep my 7.5, 8 hours. That was mind blowing.
Sleep for me has been a big one, because like I would struggle with falling asleep and then still waking up at the same early time. So then I'd be tired during the day, and then, you know, obviously that builds up to stress and all those other problems. So making sure that I give myself that sleep requirement has helped a lot too. And you know, as a coach, like who works with students after school hours and stuff, I kind of have that similar thing where like the morning hours tend to be more reserved for myself, my personal time, or just for, you know, like other work things or errands or whatever. And so I've noticed, like, you know, since leaving school as a teenager and leaving, you know, jobs that I've had that were, you know, more like 9 to 5 kind of jobs, where I didn't have that morning time, and now that I do, that has made like such a huge difference in all areas, like my mental health, my physical health. You know, like I eat healthier, and it's simply because I can take it slowly, you know, that
I know exactly what you mean. It's and I think that's the thing. I was fighting against who I was for loads of things. I was really fighting against, I was doing a job that was, first of all, kind of against the grain in terms of my purpose. I am somebody who genuinely sees the best in people and wants to see the best in people, and as a coach, that's a really amazing thing. As a lawyer, you have to see the worst in people, and although I was good at doing that, it was really hard for me. So that was one big thing that obviously for me, that is self-care as well. So in a way, going to see a career coach was self-care for me as well. And I start off a lot of my sessions when people get a bit worried about, oh, career coach, you know, what is it going to be? And I try and see it like a well-being to yourself as well. Because psychologically, that is what it does. When people sort of get clarity about what their next steps are, what they want, they feel a lot more relaxed. So I guess that's one, that was one big thing. So sleep pattern is a big one. What would we say for people who can't do what we do, which is basically organize their day the way they want and have that luxury?
Oh, yeah. So this is interesting. I was just talking to a student about this. You know, she's in high school, and she was talking about the difficulty of finding that time to take care of her responsibilities, and everything. And so I I gave her, I think this was like not so much a quote, but just like words from Jordan B. Peterson. I think it was abide by your conscience. Abide by your conscience. And so, because if you, like, you know, you always have that voice that tells you, like, you need this, like you need to go to the bathroom, and you need to drink water. You know, if you can start paying attention to that, abide by your conscience. What does it mean, right? Your conscience is working for you, right? It wants the best for you. So if you can start paying attention to that,
instead of the negative voice that's telling you all the other things we were talking about earlier.
And then all of a sudden you start to notice that you know, the previous obstacles were just excuses, and it's like you have to rebalance what you believe are your priorities, because we kind of have this hierarchy of what we think we should be doing, and we have to really, like, you know, so if you're feeling tired, if you're feeling stressed, if you're feeling like your metabolism is out of whack, then you have to take back your power and decide, okay, I'm going to make these my priority. I'm going to listen to my conscience. I'm going to listen to that voice that my body is speaking to me, or the, you know, the back of my mind is speaking to me, saying, these are your priorities and you need to start paying more attention to these. It's not about, you know, rushing to the next thing on your to-do list, and only if that means that it's actually causing you more stress in your life. Like, I'm not saying that going to those meetings or getting those errands done shouldn't be important to you, but that you have to start evaluating,
is it more important than your life?
Right, exactly. Yeah.
And I think that's the it's that important, I think. And for people, like, particularly people maybe in my position where they have had really jobs that have taken over their lives, I think it's very hard to get that, but it goes to that extent that it's actually your life. I was saying things like, this job is killing me at one point, and I was using really difficult words, and I wasn't listening to myself. I was saying things like that, and I wasn't listening to myself. And so I think what I had to take it to the real limit. But I think the first thing that helped me was to do that work on myself, in terms of putting myself first again, right? And it was going to be putting myself first in my career, putting myself first in my life. That was I think that's the big change mindset. First was to putting myself first. And then there was also just, it doesn't need to be big. I think that's one big message I wanted to sort of say today, that helped me, is it actually doesn't need to be big. Like a glass of water, like a full big glass of water every morning means that I never get a headache, that I, you know, or at least a lot less, that I feel more energized and more awake. And no caffeine has lowered my anxiety levels massively. So just little things. It doesn't need to be as big as we think, I guess, is also what I'd say.
Start small. And so I like to add things gradually. So I would, you know, I'll start with, for example, a glass of water first thing in the morning, and I'll try that for a week. And then the next week I'll do a glass of water and meditation. And then the next week I'll do a glass of water, meditation, and a 30-minute walk. And then the next week I'll add on another thing. And then until I've started to recreate a quality of life that actually brings, you know, allows me to feel more joy and satisfaction out of how I live.
And I think when that's a really important bit as well, is that everybody is also different in how much they want or what they need. It might not mean as much. Some people, they need more, and some people don't. But some people, for them, being able to, you know, have a glass of water, have their you know, have a healthy breakfast, and then a healthy lunch and a healthy dinner, going out for their 30-minute walk, that will already make a huge change to their life. And it doesn't need to be as big as we think it is also. I think that was the thing that for me, it felt like a massive hurdle.
And it shouldn't feel like it's an extra burden or stress to try to put self-care into your day, right? Like, it shouldn't cause you more problems. It should be alleviating your problems. So you should start with a small activity that brings you joy, you know. And so maybe that's like doing your nails once a week, or talking to a friend long distance on the phone for like one night of the week, or whatever, you know. And then I mean, it's finding those simple moments where you are enjoying life for what it is, and not trying to put in hard work so that you can enjoy life later.
And you can see how that can help with happiness, because we always try and find happiness in the future, you know, the next goal and the next goal. But actually what happens is that we're just unhappy until we reach that goal, and then our brain kind of makes us figure out another goal, and then we're unhappy until we figure out. So that's why it's actually and so it's actually fundamental to happiness. When people ask me, you know, what is happiness? Happiness is now. It's not to be like chased. You know, even if I'm a career coach, and a lot of things we do is about setting, you know, goals, but it's also about it's more like a path rather than like a destination. It's like being on the right path, and seeing, living it, I think today, realizing what you can live it today. I think that's the big thing. And self-care reminds me of that in the sense that it's about doing it now. One big thing that I was talking to with one of my clients, she was feeling guilty about self-care in the same way, I guess, that I was, but she was feeling guilty about it and saying that, I'm lazy, I'm doing all the other things and I should really be working. And then she was kind of working, and then not being fully efficient in her working, and still procrastinating, but procrastinating in ways that weren't helpful to her. She was going on social media or she was doing other things. And so she was feeling really frustrated about it and feeling crap about it, about herself. And one of the things that I started off with was to, like you said, insert things that she liked doing and asking her to actually do them and add them in her schedule. And like it was like going for a walk or seeing a friend or, reading a book or whatever it is activity that she liked doing. Yeah. And when she started doing that, initially she said, I'm doing it, but I'm still feeling guilty whilst I'm doing it. So, and as soon as I told her, I said to her, you need that because you're actually going to be more efficient once you do it, right? Yeah. So it's actually not a distraction. It's actually to help you do better. Yeah. And weirdly enough, after she did that, she something changed in her mind, her mindset on what she was doing. She actually was like, oh no, I'm actually being productive because it's going to help me be more productive. Yeah. And when it did, it worked. She was just like, oh my God.
Yeah. Yeah, I said something really, really similar to another student who, has this, she gets caught up in the anxiety of not putting enough effort into her homework. And so trying to throw in more time and focus and energy into her homework. And so I was telling her okay, would you rather feel anxious and stressed while trying to do your homework and sitting down and looking at it and feeling anxious and stressed while you're trying to do it and not really doing it because you're feeling stressed and anxious? Or would you rather step away from your homework and just spend the exact same amount of time not looking at your homework, feeling stressed and anxious, but going outside, talking to a friend or just relaxing, giving yourself me time? And, at the end of the day, you've spent the exact same amount of time not doing homework, right? So would you rather relax during that time or would you rather feel stressed and anxious during that time? And then she was like, oh yeah, I guess that makes sense.
But that's also a difficult one because it makes me think of this other voice, that's the avoider voice, right? That a lot of people have, and I know my husband has it, and it's just, and it's a really difficult voice because it's the one that makes you say, oh, I'm lazy, right? It's the one that kind of makes you do the things that are more enjoyable because you're scared actually of starting whatever it is that you're doing. And I think that's where it's no longer self-care. And that was an interesting point because the way you were talking about was self-care, but I'm just thinking, it's a fine line for a lot of my clients on that, at which time it actually is feeding into that negative voice and which time it's actually self-care. And I think it all goes and hyphens on that idea of intention, of actually being genuine with yourself and seeing, okay, what is it, why? And that's emotional. Again, it's just progressing your emotional intelligence. And that's something that you can learn. It's about understanding and listening to our bodies and listening to actually what it's saying. Why am I stressed right now when I'm looking at this page? What is it? Is it because I'm actually not okay and I need self-care? Or is it because I am scared of this task and there's something that I'm trying to avoid by doing that? And I think that's a completely different thing, actually.
Self-reflection, self-awareness, and again, taking the time to do that self-reflection.
Totally. Actually, that's one very good point. It's about, when we work on these negative thoughts that we all have, imposter syndrome and things like that, which is something we could actually talk about next time, imposter syndrome. But when we think about all of these negative thoughts we have, the best way, it's like a muscle to try and like it's like a connection that our brain has made and is so used to making, right? Oh, I'm an imposter, or I'm scared of these tasks, or I get a blank when I think about maths, or whatever it is your thing, right? Your brain's so used to going to that immediate response that it doesn't actually allow you to stop and think. And like you said, one of the things that we could do in self-care that I do a lot actually of, and I do a lot of psychological self-care, I guess, in that sense. I probably don't do physical enough, but I do psychological a lot. And one of the things that I do is ask myself those questions. I'm feeling anxious. Okay, what's the feeling? When am I feeling it? I'm feeling it. Okay, I'm feeling it in my chest. I'm feeling it in my stomach. Okay, what is it trying to say to me? What are the thoughts that are going through my mind? And they're often very negative thoughts, they're like, oh, you'll never make it, you're terrible, you're not good enough, all of my insecurities. And then I just ask myself, are they true? Are they not? And this process, obviously, no, if they're not true, you're not an imposter, you're not worse than everybody else on the planet, all of these thoughts, they're not. And so once you do that work on yourself and you build that muscle again, it becomes so much easier next time to go through the same process. So I guess it's another form of self-care as well to do that.
I go through kind of that same questioning, like, why am I feeling like this? What's like, and often when it's really overwhelming, I actually have to write to myself, like, why am I feeling like, and then like literal conversation with myself through pen and paper, because sometimes it's just too overwhelming to even have that conversation just in my head. And so I find that helps a lot.
Hugely. And that's actually self-care, because what is self-care is to help you feel better in yourself and be happier, really, isn't it? And once you try, instead of sticking to being anxious, and you actually start really being more self-aware of that anxiety, where it comes from, what the thought is, and whether it's true or not, and usually it's not, your brain, you actually feel better. You feel happier, you feel less stressed afterwards. So if that's not self-care, I guess, there's so many ways, I guess, of having self-care is what we're coming to, isn't it, at the end of the day? And what's right for you is right. It's about listening to your body. So what would you take away from today then, if we had to sort of say the things that you've taken away from this conversation, and and maybe some tips or anything that you would give to our listeners?
I guess I keep thinking back to that, like, doer versus beer thing. That really stood out to me. I think you put it really nicely, and it really helped me kind of see this, the idea, like the struggle behind getting into self-care a lot more clearer in that sense. So I think that could help a lot of people, who see themselves as doers, to ask themselves, what does it mean to be a beer? A human being, not a human doing.
Absolutely. I think that's exactly it. And the thing that for me stood out the most is something you said, which is listening to your body. And it's actually about it's just learning the language of your body, and actually listening to it, properly listening to it. That's the key to self-care for me, is actually listening to it and prioritizing it, which is another thing.
Prioritizing. And finding that power for yourself again, to prioritize it and to question why you're feeling a certain way. And
so that takes you to the last question, like the tip. So what would a tip be for people to help them do this?
I guess I don't know. Self-empowerment, like just like working on self-empowerment, and self-reflection.
There you go. I think so as well. I think it's actually the tip for me, for real self-care, not just self-care because you've got an app and that it will last 3 months or whatever, but real, genuine, long-term self-care for me And again, I think that's a different thing. We can all do an app for like a month, but it will kind of gradually, you won't do it as much. And you see what I mean? So that's not what we're talking about. I think what we've been talking about is real long-term self-care. And I think for that comes from self-awareness.
Yeah.
It comes from being aware of yourself and your tendencies. Am I too much of a doer? Do I tend to put other people first? That means I've probably got quite a lot of leeway to give myself a bit more, you know. So it's a good way to actually do that. So for me, it's definitely self-awareness if you want like long term. And something that you feel works for you is not just what other people tell you self-care is, but self-care for you that comes from listening to you, not other people.
Yeah. Definitely.
Cool. That was brilliant. Thank you so much. And thank you so much to all our listeners. Hopefully this was really helpful to you. If you have any comments or anything, obviously, as always, do feel free to contact us or leave a comment under the video. And if you've got any other topics you'd like us to discuss, I feel like maybe imposter syndrome is one that we might discuss that one.
Yeah.
And it was really lovely to have you all, and see you next time.